Okay, now we've worked with a few different tools in Photoshop. We're going to take a bit of a deeper dive into the layers panel over here and go back over some of the things I've been working with and a few more options in here to just understand what you can do with layers and how they work. So as you've noticed by now already, you can see there are different types of layers you can add. If you remember all the way back at the beginning, we added these effect layers. We click on those, the properties panel loads up alongside those with control over the effects that those layers apply. You can see the type layer there has its own little icon just to kind of indicate that there is type in this layer that can be edited. Under that, we've got this layer where I just did all these paint effects. And if you look really closely, what you're seeing is a preview of what's in this layer and this layer alone. So you'll notice in that sort of thumbnail, all that has is the paint. It doesn't have the whole image that you see here. It's just that layer. Underneath that, you can see the preview for that is the original photo, unaffected by this paint, the text, the effects that are on top of it. So that kind of grounds you into what is this layer? What is it doing on its own? I'm going to show you a few little shortcuts and things to help you work with layers that come in useful. One of these is visibility. So this eye icon on the left gives you the ability to turn anything on and off. So I might decide I don't want the text at the moment, or I might decide I want to do some work on the photo under the text. So I just need to turn it off while I work on it, and then I can come back, turn it on later. Another thing you might want to do is isolate a specific layer. So if you hold the Alt or Option key down on your keyboard and then click that visibility icon, it will turn every other layer off except that. If you hold Alt or Option down again, it'll turn them all back on. So I could do that on the text layer, for instance. That'll isolate the text. Click it again, everything else goes back on. Do the same with the paint layer, and now we can see these individual layers by themselves. Now, there's a little caveat to this. Say you use this and then decide, oh, I might toggle the text layer on next to it. What that means is now that Alt option is lost. You've effectively broken away from the state of the visibility, so you'll then have to turn all those layers back on or off manually. It also means if you had some layers that you were intending to hide, maybe something you were working on temporarily that you didn't want visible. If you use this, so say if I isolate the photo, hold Alt down, click that, you can see it doesn't turn that text layer back on as I toggle that Alt click on there. So that's important to realize as well. If you've got 200 layers and you accidentally sort of click a couple back on, and then you can't remember which ones you had turned off, that can really get you into trouble where you've got to sort of go through all your layers and figure out which ones didn't I want turned on and off, etc. So just be a little bit careful with that. So as well as this being sort of a top to bottom stack of layers, you can also arrange these into groups. Down the bottom here, we've already touched on this icon, new layer, and next to that, we have this option, group. So if I click that, that's a new type of layer. This is called Group 1, exactly the same as the other layers. I can double click on that and rename it. So I might call this effects. Then what I can do is grab our two effects layers here, click, hold, drag them on top of that layer. You've got to just wait until you can see it sort of all highlighted blue, let go, and it will move that into that folder. Now, in doing that, it's indented the icon a little to the level of the folder just to sort of show you, hey, this is actually part of the folder now. This can get a bit fiddly, which I'll show you in a second. Do the same thing with the black and white effect. Drag that on top of the effects folder there, and you can see it's popped that in as well. So both these layers, if I turn everything back on, are now in that one group. What this means is with groups, you can now turn the groups on and off wholesale. So I could get the effects folder here and go, you know, I don't want any effects applied. So I just toggle that on and off, and it turns all the layers off at the same time. You got this little chevron next to the group or folder there. If I click that, it will open and close the folder. So this becomes really useful as well if you get a lot of layers, group things together, hide them so you know they're all in there and they're doing something, but you don't necessarily need to see them all the time. Now, having set this up, there's one little problem here, because when I drag those layers into that folder, they've actually gone in out of order because the green wash is now underneath the black and white effect. So effectively the black and white effect is taking our green wash effect and making it gray. So to get it back like it was, I can grab my green wash layer here, click, drag it, and I've just got to be really careful until I can see this sort of blue line that separates this layer and the group, and then it will be on top. So now we're back like we were. What if you wanted to pull one of these layers out of the group, so you know you no longer wanted it in the group? Same kind of thing. So I can click, drag that down, put it there, and you can see it's kind of lost the indentation now. So now it's come out of the group. It's not part of that group anymore, and it's just in the normal stack of layers underneath. I'm going to drag that back in. Same thing, look for that blue line, and in it goes. I'm just going to touch on a few other features that are in the layers panel. Again, these will be more sort of advanced videos I'll cover later, but just so you sort of understand what they are now, so it's not too confusing. There's a whole concept called blending modes. So each layer can actually have a kind of effect of its own in terms of how it looks and behaves. And you'll see that in this drop down up here. So you can make a layer darken or lighten all the layers above it. This can get kind of hard to wrap your head around, but for the most part, we're just going to work with all these layers having a normal blending mode. You can change the opacity of layers. So I could say with this paint layer, whatever I painted within it, I can click and drag on that text next to that numerical value and say dial that down to 50%, and now everything in that layer is now half visible. You can do that to a group as well. So this group here with these two effects layers, I could drag the opacity of that down to 50%, which in this case is saying only apply these effects to 50% of the document, if that makes sense. So it's very, very powerful what you can achieve with some of these options in Photoshop. There's fill as well. This is kind of a special one that's to do with some of the blending modes, so I'm going to cover that at another stage. You've got a lot of little options here, things like locking the position of layers so you don't accidentally drag them around. You can lock visibility, which is another topic we'll touch on as well. You got filters up the top here, so I could click these to say filter for text layers. Again, if you're working on documents with lots and lots of layers, these can come in useful. I tend to find with good layer management, naming, groups, color coding, I don't generally need these. And then down the bottom here, we'll just touch on a couple of the other icons I haven't mentioned yet. So we covered new. We briefly covered this layer, which adds the adjustment effects, or adjustment layers as they're called. You can actually add other effects to your layers. So you can add shadows, bevel, emboss, borders, that kind of thing. Again, we'll cover that in another video. And then you've got this option, add layer mask, which is a whole video in of itself, which I'll be doing. And then lastly, you've got this trash can. So what that will do is delete layers. So as long as you've got a layer selected, if you hit that, it will delete it and it's gone. Obviously, you've got the undo history where I can come back up here, edit, undo, delete, or Control Z, and it will pop your layer back. Other thing you will notice with the layers we're working on here, as well as these thumbnails, on these layers, there are these kind of link icons and these white boxes next to them. So these are layer masks. I'm going to make a separate video about these. Suffice to say, if you see these, don't worry about them. They don't do anything if you haven't touched them. But layer masks are pretty advanced concept, so they're going to need their own video. But this pretty much covers the layers panel and the most important things you can do with it in terms of organizing layers, what they do, groups, that kind of thing. Head to toyshooter.com for more tutorials, resources, and help with Photoshop compositing. You can also subscribe to my free newsletter by visiting shoot.toys in your browser or clicking on the link on screen. You can also follow my work on Instagram at instagram.com/shoot.toys. Subscribe to the channel to watch a special subscriber-only video, which you'll find on my channel page after subscribing. Lastly, you'll find links to all the places I've just mentioned in the description for this video below.